Good evening. Welcome to a People for Effective Government online event. We're glad to have you as participants. My name is Chris Venn. I'm a PEG board member, and I'm joined tonight by Ginny Darrell, who's also a PEG board member, and we'll be co-moderators. PEG, People for Effective Government, is a nonprofit, Spokane-based, nonpartisan coalition. Our mission is to support bipartisan approaches to governing, which are fiscally responsible, ensure an adequate social safety net, and promote a civil society. We've been holding in-person forums and online events for 3 years. For those who are new to our events, we look forward to having you join us in the future. We're committed to changing the current political climate in which the two major parties have become increasingly polarized. We're working to encourage sincere and civil debate about the challenges that our community and nation faces and about effective solutions to those challenges by providing speakers with information and perspectives on a variety of relevant topics. We're a small grassroots organization working with very shallow pockets. If you're finding these events helpful, as you think about these issues on the local, state, and federal level, please consider joining as a member or making a donation to PEG. We're a nonprofit relying on membership dues and donations to cover our costs. If you're interested in learning more about PEG and possibly becoming a member, please visit our website at www.pegnow.org. As a reminder, the views of our panelists are their own. Members of the audience are welcome to submit questions at any time. Our speakers will answer as many questions as possible before we end the forum at around 8:30. Please be brief. You can ask several questions, but please submit only one at a time, and please submit via the Q&A feature. This event is being recorded and will be posted on our website within a couple of weeks. Our topic tonight is Spokane's housing crisis. Are we making progress? In October last year, PEG had its second forum on housing, and in that forum, panelists generally agreed on the steps that could be taken to increase the availability and affordability of housing. Here's a summary of those recommendations. First, change regulations to allow small housing units and townhouses on small lots. Address the supposed missing middle. Create a better pathway for innovative development, an environment where projects like Kendall Yards could again be developed. Encourage multifamily development in more areas, not just low-income neighborhoods, and incentivize affordable housing, especially innovative approaches. Tonight's question is, have we made progress in these areas? We've assembled a very knowledgeable panel who will bring a variety of perspectives to this discussion. First, Tom Hormel has served the realtors on local, state, and national levels. Tom has served on the Spokane County Housing and Community Development Advisory Committee, Eastern Washington University Athletic Association Board, Spokane March of Dimes, Habitat for Humanity, Longview Homeowners Association, Green Acres PTSA, Spokane Community Land Trust, and One Spokane. Tom has received many industry awards, including the 2010 Washington State CRS of the Year, the 2019 Spokane Realtor of the Year Award, and the 2021 Washington State Realtor of the Year. Spencer Gardner, who will join us shortly, hopefully, recently started as the planning director for the city of Spokane. Before that, he worked as a consultant on planning and engineering projects, for communities of varying size around the country. Spencer earned a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Wisconsin and a bachelor's degree in economics from Brigham Young University. He spent the past dozen years working for 2 private planning and design firms, working on a variety of planning efforts. His role includes providing strategic leadership and support to planning services while overseeing growth management and comprehensive planning. Chauncey Jones, along with his cousin Jerry Jones, founded A Better Way, a real estate development company that focuses on affordable housing and home ownership. Chauncey is part of a nonprofit organization called Take Up the Cause. Take Up the Cause was formed to bring service-enriched affordable housing to disinvested communities in Spokane. Chauncey is also the Community Engagement Board liaison for Spokane Public Schools, where he assists with connecting families to district and community services to promote active participation of families in the education of their children. So those are the panelists, and our format tonight will have short individual presentations followed by an interaction among the panelists and then questions. We'll start with Tom Hormel. Tom, you've got the floor.
All right. So the question is, have we moved the needle on this? And I think that, that's a double-edged question. I think we've moved the needle in some ways, and in other ways we have not moved that needle. Last year in Spokane, we had the second largest number of sales in the history of the Spokane realtors. So that shows that there's a lot more people buying in the area, but we also have a lot of people moving to the area. So while there's a large number of sales, we also had a population growth. There was some studies that have been done, and one of the studies that was done through the legislature showed that Spokane County is about 25,000 homes underbuilt since 2010. That's a large number. And it's nice to say last year we had, I think, the third or fourth largest number of new homes come on that we've ever had. But the problem is those are not affordable homes. The building industry has gotten to be too expensive. And we know during COVID, we saw prices of lumber, and we saw OSB that was $7 a sheet go all the way to $93 a sheet. So we saw, I had a small subdivision out in the valley of Spokane where we started, and the first home I sold was at $378,000, I think was the final sales price. And the last home I sold in there was $530,000. Similar homes, but that was what the cost. And the builder made the same percentage of profit on the last home that he did on the first home. So the builders aren't getting rich on this. The costs are going up. Every time that the legislature passes a new rule or a code change or anything of that nature, it adds to the cost of housing. And that's where we've got to try to move that needle too, while balancing, global warming and all of those things that we talk about. We've got to also balance affordability. 35%, it's estimated that 35% of the cost of building a new home is in government regulation. And that's too high. And the government continues to ask the builders to lower their prices while they don't lower any of the regulation or the cost of the regulation to build that home. So, one of the ways that we can change this, I think, is we need to get out the vote. I will tell you that I pulled the numbers today for a post that I did on Facebook that in the last election last year, which was council elections and other municipal elections, we had less than 37% of the voters actually turned out to vote. I mean, that's crazy. And we know those people that turned out to vote might not have known the issue because we are so partisan now that they didn't care about the issue. They were voting for one of the parties that they align with and not actually looking at the issues. The legislature going into 2021, they told all of us, last year I was the president of Washington Realtors, and last year going into the session, they told us that housing was the number one issue. Well, there were 4 housing bills that would have added to the housing stock. One of them was a missing middle bill proposed by the governor that would have allowed higher density in all areas. And all 4 of those bills never made it out of the legislature. In contrast to that, there were 3 bills that we tracked that actually added to the cost of housing that did pass through the legislature. So there's a disparity between what the legislature is saying that we need and what they're passing. And that's where I come back and say the apathy of the voter, the 63% that didn't even turn out to vote. We've got to change that. We've got to figure out how to make that work, and we've got to start putting people in places of power that can actually help move the needle, because they continue to. What we heard on a lot of those bills was, well, that bill's not perfect. Well, no bill's ever going to be perfect. And so we continue to look for the perfect bill, and we pass up on the incremental steps, which we could have been making over the last 20 years. Something that popped up a couple of months ago, we pulled a letter out of our file at the Spokane Association of Realtors that we sent to the City Council of Spokane. In 2001, outlining the impending housing crisis that we thought was coming. And I could have, quite literally, I could have changed the date on it and resent it because none of those issues have been addressed. They keep wanting high density and only along the corridors, and that hasn't worked. I don't know how long you continue to try something that doesn't work and continue to not make any changes to that. Plus, on top of that, I mean, Chauncey can talk to the building side of it, but on top of that, those are some of the most expensive properties to build on. Because of where they're at and just their proximity to Division or Monroe, just the sheer cost of the land to develop makes them not the best projects for that multifamily project. One of the other things that we need to talk about is the gap in home ownership rates that we're seeing. We were talking beforehand, and Chauncey had mentioned that, and I've heard the same number, that 85% of people of color in Spokane are renters. So that means there's a 15% home ownership rate in people of color. That is the lowest rate in the nation for a major metropolitan city, the lowest rate in the nation. I mean, we've got to figure out how to bridge that gap. We've got to figure out how to make affordable housing. Numbers to date, just so you guys can know, the year-to-date median income price in the Spokane Association database, and you've heard numbers thrown out there at 450, 480. That's a month-over-month median income price. When I take a market snapshot of a 1 month, there could be 5 homes at $1 million that sell that skew that number. But for the year, we're at 422,250 for our median income price. When we did the statistics on wages in Spokane, only 7% of the wage earners in Spokane can afford to buy a home at that median price. That's a big problem, and we've got to figure out how to solve that. I'm going to let the other speakers speak, but I can tell you, I've seen the plans that Spencer has put forward, and I am super excited, and hopefully we can get those things through the city council because they are things that can move the needle. And when I talk about voting, that's where you guys all need to, everybody that's on this call, you need to call your city council members. You need to call them and tell them that we need to support this plan. We need to support all of the things that the smaller lots and the higher densities and even multifamily in residential zoning. If that house is built, if that townhome or duplex is built to look like the rest of the neighborhood, it's not going to impact the neighborhood. I can tell you as a realtor of 24 years, I've sold homes right next door to a duplex, and it didn't affect the price or the value of that home. That's a fallacy that's being proposed out there and sold out there so that we can continue to keep our neighborhoods looking exactly like they are when we're looking different and our people are looking different. And at some point, I've got 2 children. I want them to be homeowners at some point. But right now, one of them's a teacher and the other's just headed to college to become a teacher. And neither one of them on their salary could afford to buy a median income price home in Spokane. That really, really saddens me. And so that's why we're here today to talk about this, because if we can all come together with civil discourse and not get mad at each other for differing opinions, but find common ground and work towards that common ground, we can start to move the needle on this. And we won't see our community turned over and become and look like, I can tell you, Kootenai County became a county that the people that grew up there could never buy there or live there, and you've got a whole lot of homes over there that are only occupied in the summertime from people, and that means in the winter months, the stores aren't selling groceries, the gas stations aren't selling gas, and there's a financial impact. The last thing I'll say is we have seen in the last 10, I think in the last, I'm trying to remember the exact number, but in the last 5 years, we've seen the numbers of cars coming from Idaho into Spokane at the border crossing go from 20,000 to 70,000. So that's people coming across, and I have nothing against people that live in Idaho at all, but they're spending their money in Idaho. They're buying their groceries in Idaho. They're buying their gas in Idaho. They're paying their taxes in Idaho. And that's because they couldn't afford to buy here. Thankfully, Idaho prices are starting to rise just as much as ours because of everything that's been going on and the influx of people moving in. So that might start to level out. But we have got to make sure that the regulations and the city, our cities and counties, pass regulations that add to the housing stock. We've got to move that needle. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Tom. I appreciate it. Spencer, glad you could join us.
Thank you.
And if I kind of have you slated next, and the overall question is, over the last year, have we really moved the needle at all towards more affordable and attainable housing?
Yeah.
Are we making progress?
Thank you. I apologize for being late. A combination of technical difficulties and a calendaring problem. So I thought I had 15 minutes to spare when I checked my email and realized I needed to jump on right away. Anyway, I'm here. So the answer to that question is no. We have not made the kind of progress that we need to on housing issues. And there's a lot of reasons for that. You can't really point the finger at one individual person or one individual problem. There are, I think, some issues in the housing market that as a city, at least, we really have no control over. And so even if we were to magically, fix all of the problems with our code overnight, that does not necessarily lead immediately to the kind of housing production that we really need to address the scale of the problem. There are some bright spots on the horizon. So one that I will share with you, and some of you have probably been following this. I know Tom alluded to it. We have some proposals that are ready to come before City Council. And they will actually, we're planning for that vote to occur on the 27th of this month. So I would definitely encourage you to follow along with that and get involved, talk to your council members, and make your voice heard. We want this to be a public process. We want this to be a collaborative process. One of the reasons that I think we have not made the kind of progress that we need to is we try to be very, very careful and deliberate when we make changes. And that sometimes leads to a longer time frame for making changes than I think some people would like to see. I'm not necessarily defending that or criticizing it. I think it just is what it is. We've really built that into our city governance. And the goal is that we're trying to get the kind of broad participation that we feel like questions of this nature really should have. That said, I think that there are things that we can do to move faster. I'm hopeful that in the coming weeks, we can share some new ideas for how to move the community forward in this direction. And so I would encourage you to keep your eyes out for some of those changes that we're hoping to make. I think.
So what's coming up on the 27th? You mentioned that.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I'll share some of the details there. The first big one is an overhaul of our accessory dwelling unit ordinance. And I'll explain accessory dwelling units. Many of you probably know that term by now. It's a very planner-oriented term, so I'll use maybe the more friendly term. Backyard cottages is one way that people refer to it. These are small houses that generally sit in the backyard of a normal house. That's kind of the way to think of it. Our current regulations, the ones on the books right now, are really, they're old, they're outdated, and they were really not, they were not written with the idea of housing production in mind. They were kind of written with a very specific use case in mind, which is, sort of a boutique or a niche corner of the market for maybe somebody wanting an aging parent to live at home, or somebody wanting their college-age child to live at home but have a little bit of autonomy. Those are good reasons to build an accessory dwelling unit or backyard cottage. But we see them as a great opportunity to meet some of our housing needs in a way that doesn't negatively impact neighborhoods. They're sort of the low-hanging fruit on housing production. And so that's one of the changes. These would increase the viability of these types by increasing the allowable size, by modifying some of the development standards that currently make them prohibitive on smaller lots and in tighter urban spaces, and also relax some of the requirements around design standards that ultimately weren't really producing the effect that we thought they should. So overall, it's just really kind of simplifying the process. I think we're hoping to get off the ground some related initiatives related to standardized plans that people can use that give you a sort of a fast track to approval. We're also looking at the financing angle, because financing an accessory dwelling unit is one of the barriers, and that's one that the city doesn't generally have control over. So we're hoping to reach out and find some community partners that can help to bridge that gap. So that's one of the big ones. The other big one is some modifications to the way that our subdivision process occurs for smaller subdivisions. So for subdivisions that only involve up to 9 lots, our current process is that the neighborhoods and the public in general sort of has 2 bites at the apple. The first bite comes when the neighborhood councils receive notice that there is a proposed action, and they can then distribute that to their neighborhood residents, and then there's an opportunity to provide comment on that. And that provision, or that part of our process, is would be retained under the proposal. The second bite at the apple then occurs after all of the agencies have commented, including places like Avista or other city agencies and surrounding municipalities. Once they've had their opportunity to comment, we then go out for a second round of public comment that requires the proposer to put out a sign, a really large sign that communicates what's proposed, and also to mail out letters to surrounding property owners, and then give them a second opportunity to comment, essentially. That is also being retained in, or I should say, part of that is also being retained. The mailed notice to nearby property owners would continue to occur in most circumstances, and then there would be that public comment period. But we have identified certain types of subdivisions that we feel don't really rise to the level of needing that second round of public comment. And these are subdivisions that don't involve extending city right-of-way or extending city utilities. So generally, it's going to be in already built-up areas where you have a vacant lot that maybe is being divided into 2, or maybe you have a slightly larger lot that's being divided into 3. Those are the kinds of circumstances where we, under the proposal, are saying the public doesn't really need this second opportunity to comment, and it saves, not having that comment period can save a month, at least a month, from the development timeline. And when you're talking with developers, time is money. They're generally taking out pretty large loans to get, they need financing to get these projects done. And so adding that month to the timeline just increases the cost for them, the uncertainty around the process, and ultimately, in the experience of our planners, doesn't result in really any better information that goes into the process of approving these subdivisions. And so that's the heart of the proposal, is really to kind of simplify that process.
Great, thanks. So any other things coming up in the future?
Well, we're hoping to have some pretty big announcements here in the coming weeks, but I don't have anything I can share publicly at this point, other than to say the progress that we would like to have made in the last year, we're hoping to make in the next year. I guess that's a good way to put it. I mentioned our process and how deliberate we tend to be as planners. We're really sensitive to concerns from the neighborhoods about new development. And so we generally go through a lot of process, and we're hoping that we can find a way to work around some of those common concerns in sort of a test or a pilot capacity, so that we're not making permanent changes, but we're opening the opportunity for new development that that we can really show what, what the possibilities are by increasing the capacity in some of our neighborhoods. So that's coming up. I think there's a lot of work to be done. We're also doing some projects right now. Tom brought up centers and corridors, and one of the challenges that we have there, as he noted, is that they're just not seeing the kind of development that we want them to. And so we have two projects. One of them just started, and the other one has been delayed a little bit in the interest of getting some code changes done that we felt like needed to be done. So the one that just started is in South Logan, and that would be focused on the city line stops around Gonzaga. And we're going to be looking at the zoning there and trying to make sure that the constraints that are in place are within market parameters so that we can actually see development occur. And we're also doing what's called a planned action under the State Environmental Policy Act, which allows the city to front load the environmental analysis work, and then developers can come in on the back end without having to do that work themselves and bring the development, and it just sort of speeds up their timeline and makes it easier for that development to occur. So that's a big one that we're working on as a planning department. The second one is a study of North Monroe, which is one of our corridors, and that's going to be looking at some of those development constraints and figuring out where it is that our code is not accommodating what developers need in order to make that development happen.
Okay, thank you. Chauncey, you're next up. So what's your perspective on our current housing crisis and how it affects the communities you work with?
So I to answer the question, I go back to was it July 26, 2021, when the mayor issued the state of emergency around housing. And to me, that's a state of emergency. Oh, we got to get results and do things now. Have we seen the changes? No, right? That emergency resonate with everyone else and everyone else see the emergency? I don't think so. I don't think that's happened. But then you got to look at from my standpoint and what we've been able to do, right, in that amount of time is in our model with a better way, and what we've done in the development and working with affordable housing is one door at a time, right? Difficult to have that impact on the whole city like you would want to with one door at a time. But imagine how that can multiply when it's a state of emergency and other people are working with us. So I got to give a shout out to Habitat for Humanity, who with us saw that state of emergency and already were operating there. So our thing was, look, we need to do something to impact. Let's do something non-traditional and come together, right? And so we started putting in the work and are continuing to do the work. And then on the nonprofit side, props again, how Take Up the Cause and Echo got together, and along with Catholic Charities and the Carl Maxey Center and the MLK Center, and came together and said, look, let's unify and do what we can to be this change and hit the ground running and say, let's get a start and do something, because somebody has to do something for us. We had this state of emergency, and we had that. Houses were a lot cheaper than they were now. Now there's, for the first time, and I study a lot of areas, but let's just take West Central, for example, right? And even all the way through, and Tom will be able to tell you this, all the way through March, rare to see a house in West Central sit on the market for more than 3 days. Right now, there's 23 if you count the 3 for sale by owner properties available there. Now, that sounds great. More housing, right? Yeah, but now interest rates gone up from a year ago, right? And so now when we talk about what Tom said, when African Americans specifically, 85% in this community are renters. Well, guess what? They were renters, and even if some of them I know would have, and I can't speak for all of them, right? It's never a thing. I don't speak for all my peoples, but a lot of them went through the first-time home buyers course. And a year ago, we're told you qualify for 240. Now let's go back and talk about the availability of the 20 homes in West Central right now. The cheapest one is $299, right? So if someone only qualifies for $240 and $300, so there's $60,000 missing, right? And these are people who work. Hey, I work, but like Tom's saying, I don't have the means to afford, never mind the median home, never mind the 420. I can't even get 300, right? And so we knew that last year, and we knew that previously, and we've known these things, right? And so, no, the work hasn't been done to help with that, because home ownership, the reason why that's such a big thing, that's a great wealth building tool when done right, right? And I understand people are trying to prevent, banks, some are trying to prevent what happened in 2007, 2008, right? With the predatory lending, and that impacted people of color the most. We're losing their houses told, hey, the note's due. So I understand that, but now we're looking at it where we're at the lowest rate of home ownership in over 100 years for the African-American community. I'm gonna say that one more time. The lowest rate of home ownership in 100 years, right? So we're talking pre-civil rights movement, all of those things, and here we are. And that number is steadily, that gap is growing. That gap is growing. So yes, there's a frustration. There's people who are doing the work, and a lot of people who I partnership and talk to who are doing the work, but unfortunately, we need that to go even further. Like a lot of times it's said, above my pay grade, right? If we start having those conversations with people in time, I understand what you're saying when it comes to getting in and voting. But again, what happens with a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of people who look like me is my input is not valid nor wanted, because I don't have a seat at this table. I'm not being told about these opportunities that are out there. I'm only brought into conversations, to be that person when you need that representation, but I'm not really getting the equity, right? So I think that that's one of the things that we have to recognize, and we have to recognize that it's a system that is not broken, but is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And so when you have a system that is doing what it's designed to do, first we have to recognize that, and then it's going to take time to implement change. That doesn't mean we just stand back though and do nothing. There is a lot of talented people here. There are a lot of talented nonprofits. There are ways when you start coming together where we can start seeing results. And if you look at it again, and I'm not speaking it to glorify myself, but my mentor took a chance on my cousin and I, right? Who didn't have any experience from this. And we just said, we're trying to break our family, break the chain, right? Of poverty, breaking the chain of despair and dependency and depression, and sat down and took that vision, and we've grown it to where now, and on the rental side, there's 9 families who have been impacted, 11 if you count the ones that have moved on and became homeowners, 11 families directly impacted by our rental, right? By our rentals of being there and being provided. And a lot of people who, just by the way their name is, were being turned away from applications. Oh, I know that name. That's too ethnic of a name. Sorry, this is rented, right? To start from there. So we're able to impact 11 there, as well as 3 more when it comes to home ownership, right? So then you got 14 off of someone saying, you know what, I'm going to take a chance on them and show them, teach them, by also listening to them to see what they can do and impact this community, right? So that's 1, 2, we're able to affect 14, and you can double that. And then what happens on the nonprofit side, right? Now we got 33, right, Chris? 33 different families that we can have an impact on. Do you see what I'm saying? So you do that 33 plus 14 off of someone just believing in one person, right? So if we just get more people like that, and I know it's going to take changes to a system that is working the way it's supposed to. That's a long road, I understand, but that doesn't mean let's sit back and do nothing, because 2022, I mean, we're going to see what we say, Tom, 2 more interest rate hikes, at least 2 more points. So you say 4 more? Tom just said 4 more. So you tell me that person who qualified for 240 last year, who couldn't find nothing last year, right? What are they going to be able to get? So then what happens? Rent's going to increase because land, hey, wow, now there's a shortage on that. We were at 0.1%, right? Occupancy. So, I mean, it just starts to happen. And then, so now I got to pay more in rent. And then you got 2 and 3 generations living in one house to try to afford to try to make things happen. And we're not getting the upward mobility. But again, I have to look at it from both sides. Like, we've been blessed and been blessed to help other people, but I don't sleep knowing, like a lot of people who make like you say, Spencer, when they get something in the mail, hey, do you agree with this? Or they get to do that and go sleep in their homes. While the people that it affects that could have that opportunity are sleeping on grandma's couch or in their auntie's basement, or as to what happened with one of our tenants. And look how this works. He was sleeping in his car when he came and brought his application. And people have heard this story plenty of times. The man was sleeping in his car, right? Came in, didn't meet the qualifications, had some credit issues and all of that. But it's one of those things where it's like, look, let's try to figure out a way and partner with someone, partner with Catholic Charities to get him stable housing. Look how this works with stable housing. And not only was he sleeping in the car, he had his 4-year-old daughter sleeping in the car with him. Okay. So he rents from us. First year was shaky. He'll tell you, you know what I'm saying? It was late payments here and there, but he got on stable ground, was able to get a job, stable income. The housing was one part of it, right? Things started working together. Well, fast forward a year later, no late payments, none of that. Was able to get his son moved in out of state and moved in with him. And so then we start talking about the next step. It's like, hey man, let's look at this. You're renting out this duplex and you're paying me this. You know, my mortgage is what you pay me. So I want you to be able to get to that point to where you can have something and you become the landlord. And he's like, well, how do I do that? Because right now my car payment, I'm paying 26% interest. So you see what I'm saying? So that's a conversation in the community where, hey, let's build it up and discuss it together because someone believed in us. So I feel it's our duty to pass that along. And some of these things we just don't know and people don't know. And I don't take for granted to say that every city council person knows a lot of the things and a lot of the implementation, even on ADUs, zoning changes. The education needs to happen. And then same thing when we talk about for neighborhood councils. So no, we're not where we want to be, which is okay, because that gives us an opportunity, right? And that opportunity for growth, that opportunity for education, so we can start seeing some type of light, right? That's what we want to see, because right now, and I know for a lot of people, it's feeling hopeless, but we want to be able to work together so we can start saying, hey, here's some things that are tangible that can yield results.
Great. Well, I would encourage the three of you to respond to what any of the others have said and continue this dialogue. I've got a couple of potential issues and questions I throw in as well. Maybe I'll start. One of the things I've been looking at a little bit is limited equity approaches to home ownership that we've seen in other communities. I know it's part of what Habitat does, that they have kind of almost a community land trust type approach. I know, Tom, you're familiar with this. You and I were on the board of the first attempt to create a Spokane Community Land Trust that maybe was a decade ahead of its time. I don't know. But certainly it's a way to help people get into home ownership without, at a less expensive initial cost, and then they pass on that savings to the next buyer of the home. One of the things that you guys all know this, I've worked at Community Frameworks for 20 years, and one of the things Frameworks is exploring is limited equity co-ops, which have thrived as senior co-ops in the Midwest, and we think they could work here as well. Wonder if you guys have any comments about the limited equity approach and whether you see that's a potential bridge to more affordability.
I think, Chris, when we sat on there, we saw a lot of those in different areas, and we looked at a lot of different areas that had community land trusts, and it worked. The people essentially buy the improvements, and they make their, they do make the money when they sell it on their improvements. They just, the land stays where the land stays. I think it's a fantastic way to create affordability long-term. I know back when we were in it, we were hoping for some projects and some excess city land and things like that to make it happen, and that never came together. But I think that it's still a viable option, because to Chauncey's point, the person that maybe was looking at a $300,000 house a year ago at 4% interest, they would have paid $1,427 for their mortgage payment. Today, at 6% interest, they're going to pay $1,775. That they could have bought in a year ago $370,000 for that same payment. So they've lost $70,000 worth of buying power when they're purchasing based on the interest rates. And the Fed is going to meet 4 more times this year, and they're saying that if inflation doesn't get under control, each time they meet, there will be a rate increase, and that's going to drive just a massive wedge. Everybody in that entry level, the first time home buyers, they're going to be absent. It's going to be, you're going to be transferring properties from homeowner to homeowner, and you're not going to see a lot of new home ownership. And that is a very sad thing. That doesn't affect that home ownership rate, which is what we need to be impacting, because we know that I think the last number we saw was like 90% of Americans' wealth is in their homes. 90% of people's wealth is in their homes. And if they never have the opportunity to buy a home, they never have an opportunity to create generational wealth. And that is something that we work every day for. I hear it every once in a while. People say, you guys must love this market. I can tell you that every realtor that I know, we hate this market. We think it's not sustainable. It's just not, it's not a good thing to have price increases of 23-24% year over year. That is just an unsustainable amount. How do you stop it? You have to build more. Supply and demand is the easiest concept to get. If there's more homes on the market, there's more availability. But the problem is that some people have different approaches. People think we need to flood the market with low priced homes, and that doesn't help, because what happens if I dropped 1,000 homes on the market today at 250, yes, I'd help those homeowners, but I will tell you that the homeowners that had bought in their homes in those neighborhoods would see their prices stagnate. They wouldn't gain any ground. So we have got to build homes at every single rung of the housing ladder, because the people that are in the 250s now, they want to move to 400 or 500, and the people that are in 500 want to move to 750, and that creates empty rungs in the ladder below them for people to get out of rental and move into home ownership. So I do want us to see a lot of lower priced homes hit the market, but an equal amount in all phases of that market, so people can move and then we don't devastate the people that were in that lower priced home, that they see zero appreciation because I've got 40 or 50 or 60 homes at the same price. Well, there's no appreciation when that happens, if that's the only place that we drop those homes. So we've got to build at every level, and we've got to figure out how to build at every level. And the ADUs, I think, it's a very niche market. I think in the beginning, we won't see a ton of them, but I think we'll see some, and that will help. We have got to stop looking for the perfect, and we have got to stop thinking that we can solve this in one foul swoop. We've got to take incremental steps to fix the housing crisis that we're in. Incremental steps. And that means every single thing that can move that needle, we need to say yes to. We need to be saying yes to things rather than no to things. We've got to get community buy-in. And I talked about the voter pool, but if we get those people involved in voting, they get more involved in all the decision making. And then when they go to say no to it, something going into their neighborhood, they're more educated, and they might not say no because they understand it more. We've got to start educating people as to what we need to do to fix this housing crisis, or that wealth gap is just going to keep growing and keep growing. And we're just going to see an entire generation of renters, and they'll be working until they're 90. They'll work until they're dead because they have no wealth built anywhere. Because IRAs, I don't know about you guys, but if you've seen the stock market lately, If that was your hope for retirement, it's a little scary right now. So, but at the same time that the stocks are going down, housing prices are going up. So people that are in the housing market are benefiting from that. So we need to get more people into home ownership.
I wanted to ask a question of Chauncey, if that's okay.
Sure.
And first, I guess, a statement to kind of riff off of what Tom just said. I think it's important to recognize that virtually all of the decision makers at the municipal level and at the state level and at the federal level are all homeowners. That's not to accuse them of anything nefarious. I think it's sort of to be expected, but it's to just to point out that there's a policy at all levels is really written by and voted on by people who have a very specific worldview and are in a specific circumstance. So it's important to recognize that. And so my question for Chauncey, he mentioned that the system is working exactly as designed. I have my own thoughts about that are probably similar, but I wanted to ask him if he could elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so again, we've seen different changes in things if we go back to stuff, right? And different changes in laws and things. So we go back to the redlining, and specifically that took place here, right? And this was brought up in the last conversation too, right, Chris, where they said, well, I don't believe redlining happens anymore. They're not doing that. No, it's not specifically called redlining, but it's concentrated, like people of color are concentrated in areas. And then even where we're talking about building, that gets concentrated in certain areas, right? And then the NIMBYs who get loud. There was an apartment complex that was built, and the people who lived in the area said, we don't want any of the kids in those apartments to go to our school. You know what I'm saying? So little things like that, and to have that power to, first of all, to have that thought process of, hey, instead of great, this is an opportunity for these students, right? To come in here and be able to be around more affluent areas, right? What a great opportunity for them. Instead, it was, ooh, they're gonna come here and property values are gonna be brought down and all of those things. So what I'm saying is a lot of it is in the systems, right? And then when we talk about it, even from the walk and the aspect of African Americans, and again, we're talking about 100 years, 100 years at the lowest we are as far as homeowners, right? And so then no opportunity for building wealth. And then every time these things happen, so 2020, a huge number percent of Black businesses were shut down and closed due to COVID, right? And so without the home ownership, and now my small business that was barely getting by, I have no opportunity. And then I live in a neighborhood that is not being developed, that is not being invested in, is being, divested, right? And the things like that start happening. So that's when I say systematically, right? Because we're on a path. I think it was 2043. And again, it's not just this, it doesn't just affect African Americans, but I say that's the system we're impacted, and I can speak from my lens, right? And so by 2043, our median wealth is supposed to be at 0. Let's say that one more time. Right now, the rate for African American median wealth is going to be at 0 in 2043. It's only 17,000 right now at the median wealth, 17,000. So it's supposed to hit 0. So that's what I'm saying when things are systematically, right, put in place. And it's difficult, right? We had issues when the refis, a lot of people were refining in the last few years. Things with interest rates were getting low and properties were growing, but a lot of African Americans were going and couldn't refi, right? To, hey, let me do something to get another property while these rates are low. So that's what I'm saying. And again, it's not a doom and gloom. I'm just got to be real that that's the system. It's working by design, right? Because it can't be coincidental that we continue to just falter and fall and be at the bottom and be affected. So that's what I meant by that with the system working as designed. Because then it goes back to what you're saying, because again, it's hard to see it from that lens, because if you're a homeowner, you can't see it from the not that you can't, because I'm a homeowner, right? I'll be the first to say that. But I can see it because I was there. I grew up in a motel room. You know what I'm saying? So I know what it's like to have to scratch and claw, and I grew up in those projects. So I know what that's like, and I know what a lot of people are going through. And Black people and poor people in general have that same, like, right, that same thing where they walk into rooms and feel less than and all of that. So that's what I'm saying with the system. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. It's a depressing answer, but true.
No, but look at, so, and this is what I'm careful. I have to be, and I told Tom this before everyone before we had a little bit of briefing time. Spencer didn't get into that. We have to talk about the reality, and then we can talk about the things that this is why it's so important that we're first here, right? We ain't here just to hear each other talk, because we want people to get involved and we want to make those changes. I'm not saying that to like it's doom and gloom, it's hopeless and all that, but if we don't do something about it, like land, like to have those land banks, and we work with Habitat, again, with those numbers that I showed you, that's the only way anyone can afford these people who are first time home buyers. If I only qualify for 240, I can't get something like right now anywhere without getting some type of subsidy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to start with that, and the money's out there. That's the thing with the state of emergency, the money's out there. So imagine if, and things, and I know it takes time, but if things would have been acted on earlier, like, hey, what if it happened to 1590, 14 days, like this is Peyton Manning calling all these audibles, right? And so now it's ARPA's our Omaha, you know what I'm saying? And so now it's like, now where's that? Like if we had some of that out there, rolled it out. And I know I'm simplifying it, right? I know there's a process and these things take time, but imagine if, like what Tom says, like, hey, we know there's a need, great, let's do this. Is make sure that people are doing it with integrity. Let's give them that so that we can get some more people into those spaces to be homeowners. Because the lady I know who qualified for 240, who was a mother with 2 children, who's never had home ownership be a part of her family, was so looking forward to it and was getting beat out. And this was November by 20,000-30,000. Now, like Tom is saying, you can't even afford that 300 anymore, man, because now your payment is this. So now that's 37.6% of your take home. So you don't qualify.
Well, Chris can attest to this. We had worked on a project that didn't come to fruition also back then that was in North Idaho, where the builder, and this might be something for Spencer to think about, where the builder got a density bonus, but he had to have 10% of the homes in that subdivision had to be at an affordable cost. And it was set, based on median income and all of that. But the developer got a density bonus. So he got to sell more lots, more homes. And what that does is what Chauncey's talking about is that disperses the people of color or the renters from just a rental area into places where people are more affluent. They learn different traits and skills and things like that, and it actually brings up the entire community. It doesn't hurt anybody. I know that there was a builder that I used to work with that did that. They had a couple of homes in a couple of their subdivisions where they held the loan, and they did a 0 interest loan to make it more affordable, and found somebody in a median income price that they wanted to help. And if we can do stuff like that, that's the more innovative stuff, is where you say, hey, developer, yeah, you can get 10 lots on there, but if you want to put 12 on there and make 2 of them affordable housing, and here's what our statement is on what affordable housing looks like, then boom, now we've created 2 pieces of affordable housing while those builders are still being able to build the expensive homes that they're talking about. And the affordable way that they were doing it, again, was a community land trust. They were giving them the property over to the land trust. So now, I don't know what the average is in Spokane, but I think my land value on my home just went up to $60,000 on just the raw land. Well, you take that out of the equation, and now my house that I bought a year ago for $330,000, you take 60 grand off that, I'm at 270. I'm much closer to your friend that was looking to buy. I can tell you in 24 years, there's been nothing more satisfying to me than, I just closed one last week, and she was a single mom and had never, ever lived in anything but an apartment in her life. And she bought a condo. So to her, it's similar, but she has home ownership now. And when I went to pick up the lockbox, she threw open the door and hugged me, and and was just so appreciative, because she's going to set her son up for something different than what she grew up in. So we've got to work on that, and we've got to make sure that everything we do has some affordable housing involved in it. And I think one of the ways to do that is you can give density bonuses to people if they make a couple of those homes affordable in that subdivision.
Yeah, and I'll just note, and this has probably come up in the past in this forum, but condo law is a major challenge in the state, and that's one that the city does not have control over. And honestly, I wonder if that's the most impactful, policy in our housing market. Condos are a really great. My first 2 homeownership opportunities were condos in one city, and then I sold that and moved to the next and bought another condo. It's a foothold that we've basically just taken off the table. So I won't dwell on it too much because there's nothing I can do as a city person. But I think the idea of land trust was brought up, and I thought I would kind of come back to that and maybe tie it into Chauncey's point about the system working exactly as designed. I think the land trust is a case in point there. I think land trusts are a great idea, and I have no problem with land trusts being a solution or one solution to our problem. The fact that it takes so much energy and effort on the part of many individuals to get a land trust off the ground. And I know that Chris, you and Tom have been involved in the idea of a land trust for 10 years and nothing has come about, speaks to the fact that the system is just not designed for those kinds of ideas. We really set things up, and this goes back a century or more to when we were first, instituting zoning laws, and we were first setting up kind of financing of housing as a commoditized product. We really had kind of one model in mind, and that was the suburban family with the single family home in the yard and a nice middle-class job. Well, the middle-class jobs, that world has changed, but our financing products and our approach to zoning really haven't changed. And that's a major problem for us. Now, the financing, I have no control over. So I hope you can get something like a land trust off the ground. But the zoning, we do have some control over, and that's an area that as a city, we need to do better. That's an area that we can control.
Yeah, in looking at land trusts, one thing I've discovered by studying them across the country is that they need some support in the initial years, and it's usually from some governmental jurisdiction, because they need to get up to an economy of scale before they're self-supporting. Probably 50, 60, 75 houses in the land trust, and somebody's got to foot the bill to get them to that point. And in Portland, Proud Ground is very successful, but they had a lot of city support in their early years. So I don't know how, the city could step forward if they were serious about this missing middle and say, we want to support a land trust, or we want to support a co-op effort, some kind of limited equity approach to home ownership that's going to address Chauncey's issue, everybody's issue in community, that, the lower third now can't make the step up to home ownership. And the rents, the way the rents are increasing, it's darn hard for people to afford rents.
NAR's national economist said they think that this year we're going to see single digits in home appreciation, but high double digits. In the high teens, double digits in rent costs, and that is going to just crush the lower class, especially. So the land trust, I think, Spencer, I don't know. This is something we threw out a long time ago when Chris and I were working on the land trust, was that if the city sold any surplus property, that the property had to go into the land trust. And then the developer comes in and builds on top of that, but the land trust owns the land underneath. And that's a way that the city can put an investment into a land trust. I mean, nobody's getting rich in these land trusts, and I could tell you that because Chris, how many of us were on that board and none of us made a penny? We spent a whole lot of
About a
time
dozen
for a
people.
whole lot of years.
Yeah.
So can you guys, so for the people who are watching, let's just, I don't want to assume anyone is not intelligent enough, but can you guys break down, I know we did a good job of breaking it down, how it worked in one of the examples, but can you just break down how the land trusts, how that all works?
Sure. In a community land trust, the land itself is held in trust by a nonprofit corporation. And so that when you become a homeowner in the land trust, you buy the building, you buy the house, and you have a 99-year lease on the land.
Okay.
So you can get into home ownership for the price of just the house. And as Tom talked about, if it's a $350,000 house and the land is worth 60, then you get in for 290. And typically in a land trust, what happens is by accepting that benefit of buying in without paying for the land, you agree to a formula for resale. And that formula for resale is done a number of different ways, but basically it takes the equity increase that goes to that house and land, subtracts the land from it because it stays out of the equation, and you get some of the equity, but that price benefit is passed on to the next buyer so that they can buy in at a lower price. Like you could say, if you bought in and you were making 70% of area median income, when you sold it, you had to sell it for a price that would be affordable to 70% of median income the next time. So it stays affordable in perpetuity.
And I think that's
Once
something.
that initial investment is made, you have an affordable house forever.
And Spencer, this is something that, again, because I was talking with Terry Spencer, you couldn't make that meeting at that time, but even for something that we do, right, from the developer side of it, you can couple that, like, again, when we work with Habitat for Humanity, right? You work with that, and then, so Spencer, can you talk about the single family tax credit as well, right? So especially because we get these zombie homes, right? For everyone, I want to simplify things and not say everyone is on a level. So excuse me for just breaking it down to that. Derelict, dilapidated zombie homes, right? So we'll purchase, let's say we get one. I know, Tom, not now. Let's say we could get one for $115,000, right? And then we put $70,000 into it. Spencer, break down how that single family tax credit can work.
Sure. I'll talk about that and a related program called the multifamily tax exemption, because they're kind of companion pieces. So if with your example, $115,000 house that you put $70,000 into, let's say that that's the appraisal price or the assessor's value at the county, because that's really what the tax is calculated on. So under the single family tax exemption program, you apply for the program at the time that you submit for building permits. Actually, you want to do that before you submit for building permits. But when you apply for the program and you get approved, for 3 years after you complete your improvements, your taxes are effectively frozen at the level that you purchased. So for that $115,000, you continue to pay the tax at that $115,000 level, even though you've put $70,000 in and you now have a $185,000 house. So that lasts for 3 years, at which point then your taxes catch back up and you get that $185,000 valuation. It's not a major, every little bit helps. And it's sort of an incentive for people to improve single family homes, to improve the property, because you're not being penalized immediately for making that investment. It's sort of a small way for the city to say thank you for investing in the city, and in recognition of your work to make our city a better place, we're going to give you a couple of years where we're not going to charge you for that additional investment in the city. The related program is the multifamily tax exemption program. And it effectively works in the same way, but instead of a single family house, it's focused on multifamily houses, four units or more. And if you take, I mean, the extreme example would be a vacant lot, but you take a vacant lot, maybe you buy it for $50,000, and then you put $500,000 into it to make a fourplex. Those numbers are made up. That's totally not realistic in our market. But anyway, you would pay, in the case of the multifamily program, you can get up to 8 years or even 12 years of tax exemption, depending on a couple of parameters. So for the 8-year program, there's really no strings attached. You make your application, you build your project, and then in recognition of you investing in our city and creating housing, you get a tax exemption for that 8-year period. If you want the 12-year exemption, you have to go a little further by making at least 25% of those units affordable at a level of 115% of the median income. So I don't know what the median income is right now in our market, but roughly, you know, sort of middle of the market wages. So this is exactly the kind of workforce housing that we talk about. And that 12-year exemption can be really valuable. And developers like it because it's a carrot, not a stick. We're not forcing anybody to build that housing, but we're saying, again, in recognition of you investing in our city and then providing some affordable housing, we're willing to give you an exemption on your taxes. So you don't pay for that improvement value until that 12-year period falls off.
Where is that available?
A great example. Kendall Yards, most of the housing in Kendall Yards is a multifamily tax exemption housing. So some of those units are starting to fall off of that program, and we're seeing them enter the tax rolls, and so their tax bill is increasing. But some of those units are still on the multifamily tax exemption program, and it was a great. If you talk to Jim Frank, he will tell you that was the difference between that project working and then that project not working. It's a huge benefit to the community in the form of incentivizing investment, and it's a benefit to the developer in making these projects possible.
Where is that incentive available?
So currently, the boundaries are rather tightly defined, I guess. It's centered around downtown and then a few, I guess, major corridors, Monroe Street, I think Division, but really it's sort of focused on kind of downtown and some of the inner neighborhoods. We're actually working currently on some updates to that program that would extend it to additional parts of the city and potentially even citywide, subject to, again, including those affordable units. So the recognition is that by limiting the area, we're really limiting the impact. And we wanted to increase the possibilities for developers to come in and provide these affordable units, and again, recognize that there's a benefit to the community by giving them a break on their taxes.
You brought up Kendall Yards and
I was just saying
ahead.
the median income, I just looked it up in Spokane in 2020 was $30,059.
Yeah.
So that 115% would be only up to 35,000.
Yep.
So that would really bring in some people in that lower income bracket to be able to afford home ownership. And Chris, in the land trust real world, I just pulled up my new tax assessment. My house was tax assessed at $315,300, and 84,000 of that is land. So under the land trust version, my house would be selling right now if we were selling it at that tax assessed price, would be selling for $231,300. That makes it I mean, we're talking about that. I mean, that's roughly almost a third of the price of the house would be taken out of it. So it really would open those things up.
Okay. Spencer, you mentioned Kendall Yards, and Jim Frank's been on a couple of our previous housing forums. And one of the things he has said repeatedly is because of the way the PUD process is, you couldn't do Kendall Yards again. And that seems, I mean, everyone seems to like that development and like the way it looks and feels, and it seems a shame that we can't do it.
I agree. Our planned unit development ordinance, the PUD ordinance, has some major problems. I would love to fix that. I don't know that we have a timeline for that yet. There's just so many other priorities that it's not something that we're focusing on right now, but he's absolutely right. There are problems with that ordinance. And he's right that you couldn't build Kendall Yards under our current ordinance. It's maddening to me that that we there are, you know, beloved places that we've basically outlawed. But I think that gets to a deeper point, which is, and maybe comes back to some of what Chauncey has said. Our most beloved neighborhoods, Browns Addition, Cliff Cannon, West Central, some of these places were built before we even had zoning codes. We've really lost our ability to build great places, and the kinds of interventions that we've put in place over the last 100 years have actually made our cities worse. Now, I'm not suggesting that we should do away with zoning codes. I think they came about for a reason, but it's really important for us to recognize that the introduction of more and more regulation into the way that we develop cities has generally made them worse, not better. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. And as we go forward, just be aware that you know, we used to be really good at this, and we've really lost that ability. So when we talk about, for example, densifying our neighborhoods, introducing new housing types, variety or choices for people to live in every neighborhood at different price points, that was just built into the way that we built cities. That's part of our history. Our original zoning code actually allowed duplexes in our single family zone. We don't allow that anymore. Those are kind of unforced errors on the part of government that we need to fix.
While we have a little break here, I want to encourage the audience to ask any questions. I did see one question from the audience, and that is, one of our people said, I'd like to write a note to my city council people. What's the one thing I should ask them to do?
Something. Something. Do something.
I actually responded to that, so you can see my response. But one thing was, I pointed out some of the development code changes that we've proposed are outlined at shapingspokanehousing.com. So you can go there and get a little bit more information about some things that we've been working on. That will give you some details about the specifics of the proposals. But council will be voting on the accessory dwelling unit and the short subdivision ordinances on the 27th of this month. And that's a public hearing at which they'll take public comment. So that would be potentially a forum you could attend and sign up to provide comment and tell council how you feel about those changes.
Here's a related question. Does the city council understand what Spencer is talking about? Do they understand their ordinances and zoning is creating barriers to building homes?
I think they do. I talk to them on a regular basis. As with any problem, it's complicated. And as much as I sometimes complain about zoning, like I said, I'm not talking about doing away with zoning. I think there are reasons that it came about. But we've entrenched a certain mindset and pattern into our process of development. And I don't know that I have the right answer for what should be different. And so I try to be, I guess, humble in my approach to how we do that. I don't want to come in and smash everything overnight. But it's important for that recognition to be there. And like I said, I think for the most part, council members understand that. Where we get tripped up is, okay, so what do we do about it? And Chauncey just talked about this a little bit. First, we have to take stock and say, let's understand the ways in which we're broken. If we can't even get agreement on that, then we've got a real problem. And I think council understands that things are broken. So we're at that first step. But where we go from here is that's really a more difficult issue. And that's where I think you see a lot of agreements not just in council, but around the community. Nobody likes the idea that their kids aren't going to be able to buy a house here. Even the most ardent neighborhood advocates that are opposed to new development in their neighborhood, I don't think if you ask them, they would be happy about that. But they have a very different view about what should be done about it. I try to be respectful of that, and I very strongly disagree with some viewpoints on that issue. But it's important to recognize that people don't like things to be difficult or expensive or hard. So these don't come from a place of how can I make things difficult. They really come from concern about their immediate environs, their neighborhood, or concern for the neighborhood that they grew up in, or those kinds of things.
And Spencer, you can, I'll allow you to be humble, but then I can just go ahead and toot the horn of you and Steve McDonald on the impact that you guys are having, hitting the ground running with action, right? Instead of just falling in and saying, hey, well, let me find my place. I like that you guys, because the saying says, man, if you stand for something or fall for anything. And I like the fact that you guys have both come in. Like, just to tell you guys, audience, I had a question for Spencer. Spencer rode and met me at my place again to have someone to be that accessible. Like, I'm going to meet here and let's discuss things, and to either he's the best actor in the world or he was really listening, right? Like, what can we do? Thomas, what are some ideas? Him and Steve both met me there, right? That's refreshing because it does. You guys know Tom, Chris, you've been there. Y'all been at it longer than me and sitting in subcommittees and groups and things where we're thinking, all right, we got this plan, we got this, and it never goes anywhere, right? So the fact that, I mean, don't let that go over your head, audience, people listening, and it doesn't go over my head that we got things that are going to action items that are going to be presented on the 27th. That's big. It would have been this week when I would have been upset. I'm glad you guys are observing Juneteenth, rightfully so. But the fact that you have those action items, because again, and they're part of it again, it's not to place blame. This was a position that was missing for how long was city planner?
They had an acting director for a couple of years before I started, and before that, I guess they had another acting director that was never approved. So it was like 4 years.
So like 4 years of an interim head coach for all my sports fans. Like, could you imagine 4 years of an interim head coach? Like, come on. So there's people that are in place now. So and again, like there's excitement there because again, we have some things, some action plans that are going to be presented. So you can be as humble as you want, and I'm just going to sing y'all's praises, man. So glad to have you.
The action is a key point. I counted over the last maybe 10 years, I've served on 5 different housing panels. There was a center and corridors panel. There was a housing quality task force. There was this task force. There was that task force. And all of them created these nice little binders, a 4-inch binder of the proceedings and the recommendations that are sitting on somebody's shelf gathering dust. So we need less talk and more action. We know what to do. We just got to get it done.
Well, and I want to toot Spencer's horn too, because he is a man of action, but he's also a man that's inclusive of the people around him. Because I know when he first started doing the things that he's proposing now that are in front of the council, he reached out to the Realtor Association and met with us and discussed those plans and was like, what do you guys think? Where's it at? Do I have support on this? I mean, this is all about team building. If we can build the teams that we need and the consensus that we need prior to it getting to the council, then we can get these things through. I do know, I spoke with one elected official, and I won't say the person's name, but this person said to me, when somebody buys a house in a neighborhood, they bought a covenant that the neighborhood would never change. And I said, well, you know what? The problem I have with that is, if that was true, we'd have one house and one business in Spokane, because that first homeowner should have had a covenant that his neighborhood never changed. And the other problem is the NIMBYism has got to stop. It's got to be the not in my backyard stuff has got to stop. And the problem I have with that is a lot of the neighborhoods that scream the loudest about let's say about duplex zoning and all residential zoning, if you actually pulled out a map, there's not a single lot in their neighborhood that could actually put a duplex on. So why are they screaming the loudest? That's the, you know, that's the problem, is we've got to stop the NIMBYism. We've got to stop the I've got mine, so you shouldn't have yours. There's enough out there for everybody. We've got space. I agree with Spencer. Our condo laws in this state, and it mostly has to do with the insurance around the condos and the envelope of the insurance that add somewhere in the neighborhood. You know, I've heard 65, I've heard $85,000 per unit. Well, if you're building in Seattle and you're building a high rise that's got 300 units in it, now you're dispersing that cost out to all of those units for that envelope insurance. But you come into Spokane and we don't have that kind of development. You have stuff in half of Kendall Yards. I think he wanted to, Jim Frank wanted to build his condos, but he couldn't under the law because law was so ridiculous, and the liability to the developer is so high that they're apartments now. So there was a lot of opportunity in that subdivision for condo and for home ownership that didn't happen because of it. And by the way, look at the prices in there. Can you imagine if you'd have been able to buy one of those apartments as a condo and what it would be worth today, and that wealth that could have been built there? I mean, it's crazy. We do have weird laws where after 7 years, I can convert an apartment to a condo and I have zero liability. That's crazy to me.
Well, on the topic of Kendall Yards, I think another thing I'll bring up that I hear from multiple people out in the community is how much they love the townhouses in Kendall Yards. And in the absence of condos, townhouses are probably our best option for more attainable ownership options for housing. I think that's an area that we have not explored sufficiently yet, and I'm hoping that we can make some headway on that in the near future at the city.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, and I can give you a great example of, and not to be just the bearer of bad news, but I had a developer years ago out in the valley that said, "Hey, Tom, we're thinking about buying this piece of property. It's currently zoned UR22, which is 22 units per acre, and we want to build 18 townhomes in there." At the time, it was a down zone, so they had to go through the entire process of getting a zoning change. And the neighbors around that subdivision, they said, "No way, no how is that happening in my backyard. That's the field my kids play in." And I'm like, well, first of all, that's not your field. It's owned by somebody else. And because of that, a few years later, a developer came in and built a 48-unit subdivision. I mean, a 48-unit apartment building. And it could have been 18 nice condos. There was a little park the developer was going to build for the neighborhood. I mean, it was really beautiful, 1.5 story. Now it's a 3-story apartment building looking in their backyard. And I'll bet you 95% of those people have moved from their homes because of what went in there. And when I said to them, "Here's what can be built there if you don't allow this to be built there," they said, "There's no way that'll happen." And I said, "You don't understand. That's already approved. They don't even have to ask permission. It's already approved." And that's exactly what ended up happening. And that developer went elsewhere, not even in our city, and they went elsewhere to build the housing.
Yeah, it brings up the point of incentives. We not only need to, change the regulations, but we need to incentivize the kind of building we want.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about the multifamily tax exemption. I think that's one of our most powerful tools. We're working right now on some additional changes to the way that we offer and administer our development incentives. We've got a lot of money from the federal government that we can potentially put towards some of these programs. I'm much more of a carrot rather than a stick kind of person when it comes to development. I think one of the challenges we've seen in places like Portland, where they've gone with the requirements around affordable units, is it tends to stunt the supply of housing overall, and you can potentially end up harming the overall housing market more than you help it by forcing people into things. But in the state of Washington, they've given us this ability for the multifamily tax exemption. And I think that's a really great program. I just can't say enough for it. And like I said, we're working on a few other things that in the coming months, we hope we can introduce or reintroduce some incentives that have sort of fallen off the radar to just to incentivize that that new development and include some of those affordable units that we really need.
And Chris, to speak to incentives, the National Association of Realtors is trying to get legislation passed at the federal level to incentivize development of housing units in commercial buildings that are now vacant after COVID. And the incentives there have to happen because commercial property, sells at, I mean, this was an example we got from one guy. He said, in our area, commercial goes for about $400 a square foot. And in order for a developer to buy it residentially and convert the building, because now they've got to bring in plumbing everywhere throughout for bathrooms and everything else. He said in order to do that, the developers need to pick that up at somewhere around $90 a square foot. So there's got to be some incentives there. And the great part about some of these incentives, it's a one-time incentive to create housing units. I mean, you do that to a building and you take something downtown that you could convert into condos and you end up with 40 or 50 condos out of it, and you've incentivized that one time, and you've built permanent housing. So incentives are a big deal, and hopefully we can see that legislation move through at the federal level, and we can get the federal level, the money from the feds to do it, and hopefully, to Spencer's point, we don't add so much garbage to it that it ends up not being able to be done because you've got to jump through 13 hoops.
13.
Yeah.
Seems like a low number.
Yeah. 30.
Any comments? Here's another question from the audience. Any comments with regard to increase in property taxes? It doesn't help with affordability.
We met with Tom Konis yesterday. He came into our office and met with us because as realtors, all of our clients are calling us and screaming at us and, how can this happen? What happened here? And Tom, he gave a really great synopsis of Washington state law requires the assessor's office to be at market value. And he said, Tom, we're actually only at about 93% market value with the new taxes that just came out. We're still below what's required under law, but that's because the prices keep going up and they're trying to meet those prices. So, he said, the first thing he said was, we don't want to do this, but it's state law. We're mandated under state law to assess these properties at what we believe to be market value. So don't get mad at the assessor. He did say, if you see any problems on your assessment, you should look at that and call the appraiser number, because what got sent out to you has actually the appraiser's number who did the valuation on your property. You should call them and say, hey, you've got my whole basement finished. It's only 50% finished. And he said that they're more than willing to make those adjustments. But they have to be, it's a law. So they have to do it. And yes, it does kill affordability, because now all of a sudden you've added $600, $700, $800 a year to your tax bill, and you divide that out into a monthly payment, and it hurts your affordability, because when the bank looks at that, they have to take all of that into account with your debt to income ratio.
I'll just add, this gets back to Chauncey's point about the system working exactly as designed. There's a really interesting group out of North Carolina called Just Accounting for Health. Just Accounting for Health. And they've been doing some research into the way that property assessments are done. And they've found some pretty stark disparities between lower income neighborhoods and higher income neighborhoods, just in the way that they're treated in the mathematical formulas. And it's not, like a lot of these things, it's not anybody that sets out to say, how can I, really work over the poor people. It's a combination, I think, of just kind of like the way we've always done it, and the fact that the demographic at the higher end of the income bracket and the higher end of the housing value bracket tend to lawyer up when they don't like something, and so nobody wants to really get them mad, and so their tax bills just sort of naturally end up not rising at the level that some of the poorer neighborhoods do. The research that they're doing is really important. I don't know what how it applies to Washington State. We may have different ways of administering our assessments. So, but I think it's something to watch out for, and it's something that there's just not research on at this point. So this is, I think, an area that there's some really important research going on now, and I would love to, explore opportunities to bring that kind of evaluation here to the city of Spokane.
Chris, I think you could talk to Tom and bring Tom on one of your future dates, and he could talk to that, because it's important. I mean, it is important, and it's a hot topic in Spokane right now.
Well, PEG has determined that we want to follow the housing issue. So I think periodically through the year, we're going to come back and talk about these issues and assess what's been happening, and just keep it top of the mind for people as much as we can, because it's critical. So, this is our third housing forum, and, probably over the next year, you'll see a couple more. So hopefully that more people we can educate, and the more we can talk about this, the more action we'll be able to take. So we have reached our 8:30 time. So I want to thank everybody. I don't want to go beyond what our committed time is. I want to extend our gratitude to our speakers. Thank you, all three of you, for your time. We appreciate it. Your thoughts were very helpful, and everything you said was worth listening to. And we want to thank the audience as well for joining us, and remind us that in about a week, a video of this forum will be on our website, which is, again, pegnow.org. So you can look for it there. And if people missed this, and I know I heard from a couple of people who wanted to be here, but weren't able to come tonight. So it will be available on our website. And again, good conversation by all, and thank you very much, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You bet.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.